We move over to the most stunning upset of the weekend, and that absolutely is the Cardinals beating the Eagles at Philadelphia in this one. And Matthew, I think the big fantasy storyline is how much of a mess the Eagles wide receiver situation was. Devonta Smith now dealing with a mild ankle sprain. A.J. Brown only 4 catches for 53 yards on championship weekend in a brutal Philadelphia loss.
In a year in which A.J. Brown was so good for so long, during the fantasy playoffs, he did not show up under 15 fantasy points in 3 straight games. And you figure, okay, it's Arizona. They're home. And this is a game they need to win. And yet, 4 for 53. He was wide receiver 45 in championship week. He ends the year as wide receiver 6, which just sort of goes to show you how good he was up until the last couple of weeks. Through the first 14 weeks of the season, he was wide receiver 4. In the fantasy playoffs, he was wide receiver 32. Again, just when you needed him the most, he didn't show up. And I don't know how much of that is on him versus Jalen Hurts versus sort of game script, but credit the Arizona Cardinals. They had every reason to sort of phone this game in. This is a tough matchup. They've struggled defensively this year, and they showed up in a big way. Huge win for the Cardinals. Congratulations to them. Thrilled for them. And when I say thrilled for them, I mean thrilled for them, because that win helps solidify my beloved Washington Commanders, as we stand today, have the number 2 pick in the NFL draft. And assuming they lose to Dallas, and I believe they will lose to Dallas this week. Commanders, you understand the assignment, right? We're losing to Dallas this week. Number 2 pick of the draft. And so, anyway, back to A.J. Brown. This was tough. This has been tough. I mean, I don't know what it is. I feel like, because it's not like, the other part that's weird is that it's not like, well, so A.J. Brown's going, so it must be Devonta Smith's been going off. No. Devonta Smith was wide receiver 60 this week. Had just 6 fantasy points. He's had 5 targets, literally just 5 targets each of his past 3 games as well. He's dealing with that mild ankle sprain, but still, he was bad this week as well. A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith both did not show up in what should have been a big game against Arizona.
And
shocking to me.
Yeah.
And I think that I think part of it is, I'll just finish the thought.
Right.
I think part of it is Jalen Hurts just hasn't been the same. And you haven't cared fantasy wise because you're getting the brotherly shove, the tush push. You're getting sort of a lot of these cheap touchdowns, which are elevating his fantasy value. But NFL wise, he hasn't seemed like the guy from last year, at least to me.
Yeah, I agree. And keeping an eye on Jason Kelce's status, if he's going to play next year, will be a legitimate fantasy topic, because the tush push, like you said, Matthew, is such a large portion of his fantasy production. And Jay, speaking of the quarterbacks, Kyler Murray, I mean, talk about a value in drafts this year. Not drafted as a top 10 quarterback. He finishes the fantasy season as QB 10 on a points per game basis. When Arizona has games like this that they catch you by surprise, it's on the back of Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I mean, he's still a fantasy monster. I think he's real life, maybe, I just don't want to throw out most underrated quarterback in the NFL, but I think he's in that discussion. He gets written off.
Underappreciated.
Yeah, he's very underappreciated. This guy's the number 1 pick for a reason. And to me, one of the most startling stats of the entire season is that Philadelphia, with their season on the line, with the NFC East at stake, the Cardinals had 40 minutes time of possession in this game. The Eagles just couldn't get on the field. That's why A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith didn't have these big games. The Eagles only ran 47 plays. And this defense in Philadelphia now on the season is the 30th ranked defense in the NFL after being a top 5 unit last year. And it's just infecting everything. And so Murray was awesome. James Conner was fantastic. And the Cardinals, I mean, credit to them. It's long-term, terrible for their franchise that they won this game. But for a day at least, they were magnificent.
Yeah, Matthew, James Conner with a massive championship week performance. And honestly, quietly, you take away the time when he was hurt, he was very good this season. He comes in as RB15 on the year, averaging over 14 points per game.
Yeah, on a points per game basis, he was the 15th best running back in fantasy football. He was one of these guys. I mean, this was ultimately totally a year to go 0 RB, as we talked about. We talked about this quite a bit in the preseason about how there's all this kind of quote-unquote cheap volume in those middle rounds, the 5th, 6th, 7th round of fantasy drafts. We talked about Isaiah Pacheco. We talked about Cam Akers, who turned out to Kyren Williams. But if you drafted Cam Akers and you grabbed Kyren Williams as backup, it would have worked out. And James Conner was one of those guys, and I'm like, I get it. The Cardinals are gross, and you don't think they're going to be any good, but he's going to touch the ball. He's going to touch the ball a ton. And so James Conner, especially when you needed him the most, fantasy playoffs, 6 touchdowns in his last 4 games, leading in the game to get into the playoffs, and then the last couple of weeks here, he's been nothing short of terrific. He finishes the week, fantasy championship week, as running back 4. You mentioned top 15 play. Somebody that was just kind of being left for dead in fantasy drafts at the beginning of the year. Again, this cheap volume. There were just a number of guys out there. James Cook was another one that we talked about quite a bit, going in that range that we liked a lot. Just running backs that weren't sexy, that were maybe in slightly bad situations because there was another running back there, or because the team wasn't particularly good, but we're like, these guys are all going to touch the ball 15 to 20 times, and they should be productive. The area, what you should do is draft wide receivers early this year, and then in that 5th, 6th, 7th round, draft running backs, goes kind of 0 RB, and it really paid off this year. Again, jokes aside, whatever, but my team's a perfect example of that in our league, right? I mean, ours league is a super flex league. I had the number 1 pick. I got hurt, but in the comeback around, I had CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? I got Mostert late in that league. I got just a bunch of kind of mid-tier running backs in that league, sort of pieced it together. David Montgomery was another kind of mid-tier, 0 RB target, and that obviously worked out. Yahoo didn't like it. They gave me a D grade. They said I was the 2nd worst drafter in our league, but just goes to show you, I never listened to the automated draft grades.
To be fair to Yahoo, they also said I had a bad draft, and I did have a bad draft. So good job by them on that one.
Yeah, fair enough. But back to James Conner as well. Just, really impressive. And the weird part is they didn't use him in the passing game as well. But I think that as we sort of look towards next year, we'll see if James Conner is back with Arizona. But, Kyler Murray fully healthy, James Conner back. I think they found something with Michael Wilson. Really nice player there. Marquise Brown was hurt all year long, but assuming he comes back healthy, they obviously have something amazing in Trey McBride. This is suddenly a very nice offense fantasy-wise next year.
Another fantasy championship story.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.